So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another battle that was sent to me by Winged Swordsman 44. And this is a map that actually we have seen in the past, albeit it was a long time ago and it wasn't in its current slightly ashen guise. It used to be slightly more of a desert themed map, but that isn't the case this time, and it's always been called the Elven Front, I believe. But this is just the current lick of paint that it has on it now. And it is going to be 3 Elven armies, I believe, yes indeed, who are going to be on the de facto defence today against a horde of evil forces bearing down upon them. Not too dissimilar to the battle on Lest that we showed somewhat recently, albeit on this occasion there are certain parts of the map which are actually easier to defend than that sort of entirely siege-based map. But there are also a few more open areas that are entirely pitch battle focused as well, in which obviously if it's a 3v5, superior numbers are going to wash over you unless you can dig into a good position. I imagine there's going to be a grace period because the deployment zones on a map like this are very close together, so I'd assume in the interest of making this an interesting battle they will allow the elves to at least get into some sort of defensive shape. When there's a little bit more ground to cover, I'm a little bit less in favour of that, but on this occasion I think, based on the way the deployment zones are, I think there is a very real case for saying the elves should at least be allowed to fortify along these cliffs and within the encampment a little bit behind it, and then they only have to worry about 3 ways in, I think, 4 maybe. But we'll get onto that in due course when we talk about the elves and the positions they can possibly take up. We'll start off with the attackers, as we always do, starting off with Leech over here, who's playing as Angmar. Angmar, an invaluable army to have on the attack, because not only of their numbers, which all orc factions are going to have, of course, but the fact that they have a lot of heavier units. They're very survivable, very difficult to get rid of. They are the ultimate definition of a tar pit, faction-wide, really. They just have a few units individually, which certainly fit that mould. I'm not sure we're going to be able to see the best example of that because they can hide, but irregardless, Angmar Marauders on the front, they are your stereotypical orc unit, really. Individually speaking, they're going to be outclassed by most everything they come up against, but they are numerous, and they do offer Angmar a little bit more in terms of numbers than they otherwise would have, because the temptation can be with Angmar to go fully into your mid-tier on upwards, but if you do that, you do deprive them of a little bit of numbers, and that can lessen their effectiveness, especially seeing as a lot of their units can't really deal damage at the rate you would like to, so maybe getting in and around and surrounding with numbers is one way you can do that. The Guardians of Khan Doom are the workhorse unit, really, of Angmar, the line infantry unit, which is certainly focused around defence. I mean, they are a mid-tier line infantry unit, so they can do decently in melee against other infantry, especially units of a lower tier than themselves, but heavy armour, big shields, they are more focused around their defensive values than anything else, and it makes them a solid core to the Angmar army, especially when you have the Witchround pikemen in and amongst things as well. Heavily armoured for pikes, they are a little bit more resilient to arrow fire than many of the other standard pikes in the game, but they are still pretty vulnerable to this sort of thing. And of course, when Elven archers are concerned, while Angmar's armour may be thick, without a shield they're still going to be somewhat vulnerable. I'd imagine the Barrow Wights are in here as well. They are, of course, very, very tanky, very difficult to chew through. Really, cavalry charges are your best bet at dealing with them, but on a map like this you can be constrained. We'll have to wait and see. Blackwatch Legion can be very useful against the elves, not only because of their big shields, but also mainly because they have the mass pushing abilities, which with smaller factions like the elves can be devastating if done at the right time, but if done at the wrong time, the elves can butcher them with their quality. We also have some witches in there, obviously the ever divisive unit that they are, but the elves are better suited than most factions for shooting them down before they ever become a problem. Scourge Raiders throwing projectiles, even with the armour upgrade, which consists of a helmet for this unit, they're still going to be pretty vulnerable to the Elven missiles as well, but if they can close in, their throwing axes will be useful against some of the lighter units the elves have to field. And then some Blackguard and Hammerguard in here as well, the armour-piercing Hammerguard being more aggressive and the shielded Blackguard, of course, being more defensive, and nothing else we can see, but again, Angmar do have a few units that can hide, including the Barrow Wights, which I would be very surprised not. High, who is playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, almost entirely numbers focused, and again almost invaluable to have in an attacking army because it's very difficult to chew your way through all of the goblins in a timely manner. Heavy Goblin Spears are actually pretty decent for a lower end spear unit as well, because of the armour piercing giving them that little bit of extra bite, and their shield value is higher than that of the infantry as well, so they're actually better at absorbing punishment as well. Heavy Goblin Crossbows are a dangerous ranged unit. If they can get into position, then they can do damage even to the elves, but Again, they are vulnerable to Elven missile fire as well. Plenty of heavy goblin infantry, so you can see certainly going for a more numbers-focused approach here. I don't think there's actually any halberds amongst their number though, so maybe not wanting to risk them simply being shot to pieces on the approach. A few heavy goblin archers, which is an interesting choice. I mean, the elves won't want to counter skirmish with basic archers like this, but they may have no choice if the goblins are going to play things in that way. 2 units of cave trolls, which can be very difficult to control for a defensive line because they can march through pretty easily. But one problem they do have, unlike Great Shield infantry, which other units can follow through in the hole that they make, the cave trolls are a little bit harder to support when they do that. So when they do get in behind enemy lines, they're good for hunting down exposed archers, but if they do get bogged down amongst the enemy's reserves, they can find themselves getting burnt down pretty quickly. They're not the tankiest troll in the game by any means. And then the Goblin King's Bodyguard as well back here, which is a surprisingly good bodyguard tier sword and board unit. Hidden units as well from Misty Mountains are going to be forthcoming. Then we have Mordor, played by Pager. He has got some orc fodder on the front, not too surprisingly, very cheap. Next to nothing you pay for them. The Uruk Captains are an armor-piercing sword and board bodyguard unit the orcs have access to, which against the elves, armor-piercing is of mixed effectiveness. Against Imladris, it's really quite useful actually for at least doing some damage to the elves with that, but against factions like Mirkwood it becomes far less effective. We've got some morale on infantry in there. We've also got the Beasts of Golgoth, which kind of like the Mumakil's less effective cousins in this game, and considering the Mumakil in Reforged for a while now have not really been the easiest thing to use, the Beasts of Golgoth even more so. Technically speaking, they can be effective, but whereas I have seen the Mumakil overcome their deficiencies in the past, I don't think I've ever seen the Beasts of Golgoth do so. That extra tankiness that the Mumakil do have really does make a difference in the long run. They do throw javelins from the back of this unit, however, so the missiles are actually more effective, I would suggest, but other than that, very difficult unit to use, but nice to see them regardless. Blackguard of Baroda are a lower end but more numerous version of the Blackwatch Legion we've already seen from the Angmarin. Moran on halberds here, basic halberdiers and Nazgul, as long as they're in and amongst the numerous units of orcs they should do just fine. Temple Executioners at the heart of the army as well, Temple Guard and some orc javelins, but lots of expensive units here for Mordor. We've got all of the standard high-end units, only instead of Olag High this time we've got the Beasts of Golgoth, so probably less effective overall, but still nice to see. Then we have Team Darkstar, who's playing as a Rune. He's got some Loki-Nas Rim, Variag Mercenaries, so some basic archers, some Gamprim as well, more halberdiers, more effective than that we've seen from Mordor, however. Rune have got the Narum as well. I mean, they can do decent damage to especially the lighter elven skirmishers, but you'd have to say if the elves get into a good position, the problem isn't going to be so much they'll be defeated at range, it's more the fact they won't have enough ammunition to spread out the effectiveness as they would like. Flagrim and Scion Rim, so all of the heavier runic units trying perhaps to go for a bit more in terms of quality so they can go blow for blow with the elves a little bit more so than they otherwise would. And the Eastron crossbows, which will have the same problem, if not more so actually, than the heavy goblin crossbows, because I think they've got even lower defensive values at range and in melee. And last but by no means least, hidden away here in behind the mountains, we have DF Mark playing as Rudour. Rudour's ability as a supporting faction on the attack is very, very well noted. They pair very well with Angmar because they can be the attacking folk or the damage dealing component to Angmar's tank. We've got the Rudour Swordsman, Dunland Spearman, maybe more of a numbers focused approach this time. Want for manpower over here, even with Rune going for a few more of their golden units. And then over here we do have some throwing projectiles that we can see, some Metamorphs Troll Hunters, the Berserkers and the Enslavers as well, both multiple HP versions of the Rudour units. Probably Axe Throwers in there as well, as you would expect from Rudour, maybe some Rangers too. Now then, onto the Elven Defenders. Will they have the quality to see this through? We have Winged Swordsman himself playing as Lothlorien. We've got some Kindred of Celeborn and Watchers of the Golden Wood. When they're on the defence and they have money to spend, it's very rare that you'll see Lothlorien not bring both of these units, because they're actually the most damaging infantry units Lothlorien have, as well as of course being deadly at range with their split shots and Silverthorn arrows respectively. Rangers in the current patch very important for defenders of course, and for Elven Rangers that goes doubly so because they've got an extra point of damage. Karen Amroth Rangers also have a two-handed sword in melee, so overall in terms of damage dealing potential, the most dangerous unit of Rangers in the game really. I still think the Ardenaim Rangers with their armour values mitigating Rangers' weakness to counter skirmishing makes them probably slightly better overall, or at least certainly gives you more margin for error to utilise rangers in the way you'd like. Lothlorien archers are here as well, so plenty of missiles coming from Lothlorien, loads of missiles actually. We've got the full lineup of Lothlorien skirmishers here with the 3 units of March Wardens as well. The infantry component headed up by the Caras Galadon's Guardians, the multiple HP pike unit. It'll be a nightmare to break through from the front, but if you're wise you won't try that, you'll try to circumvent the situation. Javelins from the Woodland Protectors, so more missiles technically, and then Lorenan Spearmen and Sword Masters, some Lorenan Axemen as well. So what infantry they do have is all of the cream of the Lothlorien prop, heavier units as well. And the Riders of the Golden Wood, so a little bit of mobility, but if all else fails they can still be used as a slightly smaller but mounted variant of the Watchers of the Golden Wood that we've already seen. Now then, moving on to Tommy the Wise playing as Imladris. More horse archers, interestingly enough, with the Riders of the Broinen. The Innis Rim was the only offensive cavalry we saw, and that isn't going to be the sort of thing which is going to like to tangle with even Elven horse archers, especially not the Lothlorien ones, but Riders of the Broinen as well should be just fine as long as they don't get clattered by a charge when they're not looking. Imladris Guardians and Broinen River Wards, obviously heavy infantry, very much Imladris' thing. Elder Spearmen, we've also got the Archers of Rivendell, maybe less archer focused than the other Elven factions, but they're still going to need their missiles to really pull their weight here. The Norwegians can also do so in melee quite nicely, Elder Archers. Gwythi Arthand with their very high defensive values are going to be important in this fight as well. We've got some Gwythi Myrdain, some Imladris Guardians, and some Gwythi Rockdoor as well, so not a small investment in cavalry so far from the elves, which means it's potentially high risk but high reward maybe. If all this cavalry can be used nicely, they need to though, because this is too much of an investment now for them to not be able to utilise this effectively. There is apparently a unit on the hill but we can't see it. And last but by no means least, Mirkwood played by Darthy Darth. I mean, this corner of the map might even be a better bet for trying to fortify right from the off, but I still think based on the shape of the map you need to be trying to hold the middle area and trying to block the other armies from supporting the Misty Mountains and Angmar. It's a real conundrum actually. There's plenty of ways the elves can approach this. Hopefully they choose to do so in an entertaining way. The Ents are here, so not as many trolls as you might expect actually from the attackers, but the Ents fill a similar role for the elves. Fury Ek going to be holding on to the front line, so some heavier Mirkwood units. I mean, Mirkwood are less dependent on armour than their 2 elven cousins on this occasion, but the armour upgrade does give them a little bit more firepower in that regard as well. Hiri Lung, Sidnarth the Garden, more cavalry, so lots of cavalry here for the elves. Not a huge amount of countering that from the attackers either, so maybe they've gotten away with this rather bold pick. Have to wait and see. Hiri Lung and Alth, we've got some Elders of the Elven King unsurprisingly, the Wardens of Amon Lank are hidden, the Greenwood Rangers are hidden. Interestingly enough, Imladris don't have access to Rangers, so Mirkwood and Lothlorien will have to fully take responsibility for the body-piercing projectiles. And the mighty Palace Guard are here at the back as well with their glaives, armour-piercing, anti-cavalry. Every damage bonus type is really theirs to play with, so a very multifaceted unit indeed. So, like I said, I think there's going to be a grace period, but maybe not. We'll have to wait and see what the elves decide to do with their cavalry, I suppose. Yeah, I'll make a little cut, depending upon when exactly the battle starts, and we'll rejoin when the first blows are being struck. So I think we will rejoin here. Rather amusingly, these heavy goblin spears are already shaken before actually going into melee. You can see there the Gwythi Rockdoor toying with the idea of charging downhill, but you can see the elves are taking up an extremely defensive position, and they're not going to try and hold on to the middle island, for lack of a better word, in the map either, which I do think is maybe a little bit of a shame, because it does very much limit the amount of the map that we're going to be seeing. But from an infantry perspective for the defenders, it does make quite a bit of sense to do this, but it does actually really blunt their cavalry, I think. They've already backed themselves very much into a corner, so to use their cavalry they're going to have to wait really until the late game, and considering the investment they put into their cavalry, I can't help but feel as though that might be a little bit of a mistake. I mean, if this was going to be the plan all along, they really shouldn't have brought this much cavalry, if any. But we'll see if it does actually manage to pay for itself in the long run. You can see there are several ways in which the attackers can try and breach the elven defences. They can try and go up along the higher routes. You can see the elven, or hear the elven war cry is starting to go out, so this is probably a sign that the archers are going to be starting to do their things. Wooden Realm Patrol are going to be firing away some of the units a little bit further back, the Angmarim armies. Going into Angmar Marauders, Heavy Goblin Archers, any stray arrows may hit some trolls as well. Don't necessarily think that's going to be too important, but then again, there isn't really a beginning to the assault as of right now anyway. We've got a very small pathways that Mordor are going to have to be dealing with from the off over here. Some larger ones in the wood. The initial morale fragilities we're already seeing from some of the attackers are only going to be exacerbated by poison arrows that they may perceive. Continuing to fire away at the units that are a little bit further back. Also starting to see some return fire, which may well force Winged Swordsmen here into some action, because the Variag Mercenaries, this is pretty much what they're perfect at doing as well. A reasonably cheap archer that is also capable of withstanding a little bit of a beating thanks to those shields. Perfect really for counter-skirmishing with Elven archers, especially lighter ones like the March Wardens. The first melee engagement underway though. Moran infantry, the first ones into the breach, they will of course be held indefinitely really by Lothlorien spears backed up by Imladris pikemen. But it does begin, and the attackers have got far more to work with manpower wise than the defenders, so the defenders are going to need that kind of engagement to be the dominant one in this battle. More missiles. Again, they're firing into the front of the Guardians of Khan Doom. I mean, they are a decent enough unit, but this is exactly what they're going to be very good at as well. Those big shields are going to be coming into effect here to withstand a good amount of that Elven punishment, and good use of ammunition here is going to be absolutely vital if the defenders are to see themselves through this encounter. After a century's victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Defeat is a distinct possibility for the Moran infantry, completely unsurprising. There is a very narrow pathway, I believe, the attackers can take up here, but they'll immediately find themselves meeting the Gwaith Arthan, which isn't exactly ideal either. Poison projectiles still being utilised. I think they are going after the Variag Mercenaries, but Dunland Spearmen taking a bit of that damage as well. The Beasts of Golgoth are on the way forward. Now if they're going to use these, they should be as part of a big general advance. I mean, between themselves and the Blackguard, it's not the worst idea, and they could also be used as simply a platform for the javelins for now, and I think that's what they're trying to do. A few kills on the Gwaith Arthan certainly not go amiss, and then they can be used as the living battering ram that they're supposed to be able to be used as, but we'll see how that actually goes. Meanwhile, Woodland Realm Axemen taking a whole bunch of arrow fire from the Heavy Goblin Archers, and already you can see how quickly they're being whittled down. I mean, they're actually decent enough in melee, and especially against the likes of Snaga, they'll absolutely mow through them, but very vulnerable to arrow fire like this, and so it is already proving to be. Heavy Goblin Infantry now also going to move to overwhelm them. A little bit surprising actually that the central assault's not gone underway yet, because this is by far the most vulnerable area of the defensive line, just because it's so large. And there are actually a few gaps in between the Elven units. They can be closed pretty quickly, but still, more units being committed, but they're exposed on this hill. So those Heavy Goblin Archers could really get a lot of good value off here. The Hiri Alpha are going to come down the hill, and armour upgrade and shield in hand, they will be better at dealing with this kind of arrow fire, but we do have the central attack underway as well. Angmar Marauders leading the way, and the Heavy Goblin Spears have gathered themselves, steeled themselves for the battle ahead, no longer shaken as they are. Mighty Rockdoor going to find it hard to charge through the back of their own men, but not that that's really needed anyway. Elder and Way Spearmen will easily be able to defeat Snaga Stalkers in a contest. The Blackguard of Baroda pushing through, and this is having the desired effect to a certain extent. I mean, the Lorenan Spearmen getting pushed back, the Imladris sentries as well getting buckled, and this is the kind of thing which, even though I'm sure the defenders will be able to get this under control fairly quickly, those Imladris sentries will take a lot of damage as a result of this. They are still pikes at the end of the day, and once their formation is buckled like this, they can be in real trouble. The Beasts of Golgoth coming forward now as well. I quite like this aggressive push actually from Pajo. And he's also got the support of some Easterling infantry coming forward as well. The armour-piercing will be useful against any remaining Imladris defenders. Surely the Beasts of Golgoth will die off pretty quickly, even to the extremely depleted now Imladris pikemen. It's the sort of thing which we have seen work to good effect though, hyper-aggression from attackers, and now also the Beasts of Golgoth. This is probably already the most useful I've ever seen the Beasts of Golgoth be, purely because they haven't died on impact with the unit they're engaged with. They're running amok now as well, so, but this is good because they're running amok in the encampment, so chances are they will still be doing the evil team's bidding, just in a slightly more erratic manner than maybe they would like. Cave Trolls moving forward now as well, so a lot of aggressive actions now being taken by the attacks across the field. This is where the defenders, if they can weather this storm, then they might be okay going forward in the battle, but if they can't, if they really start to get pushed back already, then things could be about to take an ugly turn for the elves. Victory seems certain for the Elder Runway Spearmen still, in spite of the horde that is upon them. The Cave Trolls actually not really breaking through the line as much as they would like, which means now that they're engaged with Imladris units, including pulling in River Wards and Guardians, I imagine they're going to start to fall away fairly quickly. Archers of Rivendell trying to use fire arrows. I mean, routing is one of the things that you should be able to do. The Beast of Golgoth actually run amok outside the encampment now, so that's unfortunate for the attackers. But perhaps the defenders have earned a bit of good fortune here. Split shot projectiles. Keren Amroth Rangers also. I mean, Ranger ammunition in a blob like that is the way forward. If they started to really gain momentum here, it would have been a different story, but now they're bottled up, this kind of blob is exactly the sort of thing that Rangers and split shot projectiles can be extremely devastating against. Carmel's Shadow Guard, the first to try their luck on the narrow pathway here, which is guarded by the Gwaith-i-Arthan. Armour piercing will be helpful, yes, but the Gwaith-i-Arthan are still so strong that the Carmel's Shadow Guard will be falling away. The Ettenwall's Troll Hunters taking a lot of hits at the hands of the Lothlorien archers that are close by. Second unit of Blackguard Baroda as well, so Mordor very keen on being aggressive here. Rudour and Rune will have to go with them if they are to be effective in this way, because there's a lot of routing going on, so I think the defenders will actually be fairly pleased with how that engagement has gone. It looked a little bit dicey initially, but no longer, and you can actually see over here there's a bit of a general retreat being ordered, it seems. The Cave Trolls being pulled off the front line. I mean, there is a decent amount of routing going on, but some of this is units being packed off the front line, which is a little bit surprising, because that is very often, especially as the Misty Mountains, going to result in your immediate routing of low tier units. Even if you're losing the battle, it's perhaps more advisable that you make the attempt of committing more to the fight. The Gwaith-i-Rokdor now though, cavalry with potentially a bit of an opportunity now with the pandemonium which has ensued as a result of a lot of routing and ordered retreating from the attackers. Cave Trolls getting in there, but Snagastalkers, the Barrow-wights taking a charge. You can see how quick the Snow Trolls are in comparison to other trolls. Need to be very careful there. The Ents are in amongst things over here for Mirkwood. Battle of the Titans between the Ents and the Trolls. And while Marauder's not going to be too much of a help against a unit as strong as the Ents, but still. And these, I mean, the one thing that we haven't really been able to keep track of too easily is the Elven firing squads up here on the hillsides. This is one thing which has certainly been giving the attackers an absolute hammering. Especially here, the Keren Amroth Rangers got a really good angle as well. So this is the sort of performance from the Rangers, I imagine, which is going to be of the very highest level. Lorenan Spearmen pushing in, trying to come to the aid of the Gwaith-i-Arthan after the Ettenwall's Troll Hunters tried to push through to a certain extent, but they're going to be dealt with pretty quickly, I fear. Some Silverthorn arrows as well, we can see there. Riders of the Golden Wood trying to use a bit of their ammunition before they too can be used as cavalry. Innas Rim will keep a weather eye on them. Now Swordsman's still there, so yeah, here we have the Innas Rim. Are they on the way over to try and deal with, well, there's actually a little bit of a counter-attack from Mirkwood archers here, which should be easily now trampled by the Runic Cataphracts. Another charge should be enough to deal with them. I'm not sure why they were utilised so aggressively, but there you go. reforming of the front lines over here.
The enemy are badly flooded. They have lost half their men.
Well, Marauders defeat almost a certainty. Still surprised they're actually still fighting on, to be honest. The Hirialth doing quite well over here. When fighting unit to unit, their attack values will see them defeat Guardians of Kharndoom, of course, but getting a little bit of surrounding action now from the Witch Realm pikemen. Some Hiriak are going to come in to try and not allow the Witch Realm pikemen to get settled into a good formation for pikes to be in. Barrow-wights now finally getting to the front line. This is where Angmar can really start to be a very effective fighting force, because you can't really get rid of them once the Barrow-wights are there. You need to just defeat them to the last man, rather than maybe relying on some of the more routing tactics. Good lord, that frame drop there. The more routing tactics that you can with Mordor and the Misty Mountains. And Axemen would have been doing quite well on the front line as well over here, I'm sure, with their heightened attack values against the rank and file orcs, and especially against stuff like Rudar swordsmen, who don't have a great deal of armour either. Carving through them nicely. Alright. How much the Rivendell still doing their thing. Quite the Rockdoor. I don't think there's much else going on there. Heavy Goblin Spears reforming their lines, but I mean they're just going to get charged here by the Gwythi Rockdoor, surely, already shaken once again. History repeats itself. They're going to need the rest of another wave of an army as well before they can start moving in with any sort of effectiveness. Losses the attacks have taken so far seem pretty substantial, but with this many evil factions, numbers-focused factions on the attack, this is the sort of thing which they can generally withstand and still be a competitive force in the battle. Victory seems certain for the Witch Realm pikemen. Defeat seems certain for the Hiriak, which again, that goes to show how useful pikes can be as an anchor. Maybe some missiles are the answer there for the elves. Rudar swordsmen already taking a ton of damage. Trollshort axe throwers getting closer to the front line. This is the sort of thing which will worry the elves a little bit. And indeed it does, because already they're the target of the Kindred of Caliborn up on the high ground. Yes, and more Troll Hunters still fighting as well. I mean, showcasing their own resilience here, but not really having much of an impact at all against the Gwythi Arthand, even after the Gwythi Arthand have already dealt with some Carmel's Shadow Guard, some very ags on the way forward just to try and keep this little assault going. Strong crossbows as well. I mean, this is where another thing worth saying is that we're not really able to keep good track of the attackers' skirmishers either. And with stuff like crossbows and javelins and axe throwers, there's plenty for the defenders to still be concerned about in the attackers' arsenal. Golgoth tribesmen. What have we got going on over here? Cave trolls. With the snow trolls once again, still this unit of Elder Enway spearmen holding on. They've easily been able to keep goblins and marauders from Angmar at bay for some time, but with trolls around it will be a little bit more of a demanding task. Some Broinen River Wards will give them a little bit of much needed damage. Still the Witch Realm pikemen doing their thing. Some out of ammunition archers being used to help shore up the line, but they're going to need something a bit more serious to deal with the pikes, and just on cue, the Gwythi Myrdain arrive. Armour piercing incredibly useful against Angmar, and indeed with their arrival that's enough to rout the pikes off. Disaster strikes once again for the attackers. The Barrow-wights mean that this attack will keep going for a little while longer yet. Guardians of Kharndoom. Very out on the way forwards. Units on the way as well. I mean, Moran on Halberds trying to get some sort of anchored unit into place on this front line as well, but I mean this has been an absolute slaughtering ground, and it's not been all plain sailing for the defenders over here either. I mean, there's not that many elves left standing, and they had to commit a lot more early on thanks to the very aggressive push that Mordor undertook. More Rudar swordsmen move forward. They still have more reinforcements they can commit though. Another unit of swordmasters now. The Narrim trying to utilise their own flaming shot. The elves already employing a bit of their own fire arrows so far. Meanwhile, oof, that frame drop in there. Imladris Guardians, victory seems certain. Bit of a counter push down here, maybe sensing the fact that the attackers faltering a little bit over here. Their army not too keen on getting closer. Beasts of Golgoth have actually reformed, although I think units that run amok and then reform in Medieval 2, there is a bug where they can't be controlled again. That may be what's happening here. I don't really know how much. They still have a lot of units way back over here, but they need to get a little bit closer to the action. Yes, that puts them in range of the Elven archers, but as it stands, they are pretty damn vulnerable to this kind of Elven counterattack, and they're eager on mopping up all of the remaining heavy goblins that are down here. The Renway Spearmen completely victorious now over here, but Javelins now going to try and do their thing, but they're exposed Javelins, so yeah, the Elder Renway Spearmen are just going to advance towards them and engage them in melee. Needless to say, Snaga Skirmishers not going to be the answer against some of the finest spears that the game has to offer. Norwegian Warriors. Mirkwood is still over there as well. I'm actually surprised. There's the unit of Guardians of Kharn which at this point are way behind enemy lines, but the Droining Ripperwards are going to have more than enough to crack through that hard outer shell of theirs. Units now arriving, the trolls being recommitted to the front line. And this will be enough to do a fair amount of damage fairly quickly actually to the Imladris infantry which undertook this counter-attack. March Wands of the Wood firing away. These poison projectiles going to have the desired effect. They might be going after the E-Strong crossbows. I mean, over here, still seeing a very violent affair. Still, the defenders have obviously got the better position for their skirmishers, but down on the low ground down there, I've already seen the defenders try and use their crossbows and javelins and flaming arrows from the Narrim, but now they are out of ammunition and just being thrown to the Gwaith Arthan, like many units before them. Essenhall's Troll Hunters still fighting there, but not for much longer. Still some sporadic flaming shot being utilised. Imladris Guardians now receiving a little bit of backup from the Elder Runway Swordmasters, which will surely be enough to finally bring about the end of these snow trolls.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Damage being accrued now by multiple different forces on the field. Goblin King's Bodyguard are over here as well though, and with the support of some that was the mechanical clank of crossbows I heard in the distance there. They will be ideal at helping to bring down the Elder Runway Swordmasters pretty quickly. So while it's interesting to see a little bit of a counter-attack from Imladris, I'm not entirely certain it's going to pay off here. The Misty Mountains, while they are taking damage, they are responding to it pretty well. And between Snaga Skirmishers and Heavy Goblin Crossbowmen, they should be able to isolate and destroy the elements of the Imladris army that were committed forward. Meanwhile, Mirkwood is still over here, still with plenty of Hiriak. Gwaith Mirdain pulled off the front line for now. No need for them to be committed against the Barrow Whites after all. Scourge Raiders now as well. More and more we're seeing some pretty decent usage from the attacking skirmishers, and these Scourge Raiders, yeah, throwing axes from the front against heavily shielded units like the Hiriak are going to be a little bit less effective, but their base damage is still going to be enough to the point where this is very much a worthwhile thing to do. Trying to whittle them down. Meanwhile, see over here, Karen Amroth Rangers out of ammunition now, so trying to get as many kills as they possibly can in melee as well to add to their already significant number, I'm sure. And the unit of Rudar Clansmen arriving on the front line, so still the attackers have got more they can commit. Woodland protectors are over there as well. I mean, one thing that the elves have in their favour as well is their archers, which have been such a fixture in this battle so far, are so good in melee. So they can definitely be depended upon later on. Kindred of Caliban already coming forward with both swords drawn. Sindar of the Girdle on the way forwards. Norwegian Warriors getting in here and surrounding the Goblin King's bodyguard, but already the Eldarenway Swordmaster have taken such a beating. I mean, this is where the Norwegian Warriors can be incredibly useful. The fact that they do have those better than average skills in melee for their kind of unit with their dual wielding capabilities is something, but they're also getting hit, I think, from the back there. Crossbows, archers still over there, plenty of shaken units for the attacks. Indeed, with these Norwegian Warriors pushing forwards, they are getting into the skirmishes, which are proving to be a very important part of the attack so far. Groin and River Ward's victory seems certain for them. The Misty Mountains General does fall, which is not too surprising. He was very much in harm's way, and the Misty Mountains can scarcely afford the loss of their generals, really. So I can imagine that we're going to see a lot more routing from them in the near future. River Wards. A reasonably fresh units of them, actually, and maybe these counter-attacks could continue. I mean, they really are pushing the attackers back now. Maybe having all those units still way back over there isn't exactly ideal. Innis Rim maybe with a good opportunity. Riders of the Golden One. We haven't seen the Sindar of the Girdle as of yet. Riders of the Groin are back there. Maybe I simply missed the Sindar of the Girdle. Heavy Gobbo Archers. I mean, who's pushing this far into enemy territory? The Eldarenway Spearmen. They've been an impressive unit so far, but they've bitten off more than they can chew here, and they're going to be mobbed by the Guardians of Khan Doom that lurk in the trees. Still some heavy Gobbo spears. Gwythi Myrdain have been recommitted as well, which goes some way to explaining why the Goblin King's bodyguard are having such a tough time. Very much the kind of unit they do not want to be fighting. I mean, we're getting into the final 10k frames now, but there's still a lot of malleability in this battle. I don't know if we're in what could be considered the final phase, unless a consistent kind of counter-attack is what the final phase is going to be. I mean, Mordor are pushing forward with Blackguard of Baroda here, maybe trying one last aggressive push into Elven territory, but I don't think it's going to go that well for them. They've got some Rudal backup, but not enough, I think, to make this stick, especially not with Kindred of Caliban. Karas Galadon's Guardians still support coming in from the archers up on the hill, including the Watch to the Goldenwood, which are going to make an advance pretty tricky. Temple Executioners, 49 of them remaining. Certainly the kind of unit which will give the elves pause. The elves very much cleaning things up over here. Scourge Raiders pushed forward into the Groin and River Wards. I mean, the Scourge Raiders are decent in melee, but the Imladris Heavy Swordsmen should be more than sufficient for dealing with them. Further afield, Scourge Raiders taking hits. Syriac's still holding firm as well, which, I mean, that is the thing about the Barrow Whites, they don't necessarily do damage that quickly, so if you've got a unit with good defensive values like the Syriac, then you too are going to be involved in that fight for a long time to come. Norwegian Warriors still carving their way through some exposed skirmishes and routing off this tattered unit of heavy goblin archers. Further back. I think that was friendly fire actually from maybe Ferodrum Javelins based on the projectile, yeah. Mordor's general does fall though, although Mordor, I think, there's not many of them left on the field, and what is left is stuff like Temple Executioners, so routing is unlikely to ensue in their ranks quickly. We now still have some higher end units. Still a few Easterlings roaming around over here as well, but it's definitely been a bloody affair. A little bit of a counter-attack going on over here as well, with the Gwaith Arthand at their head. And the Eastron crossbows are over here. Very close to the Gwaith Arthand indeed. Yeah, I was going to say they needed to get out of the firing line there. Also, I don't know. I don't think they are. You can see they're going through the Beasts of Golgoth corpses. The Mumakil corpses, of course, are actually solid entities on the field when they die. Same is not true of the Beasts of Golgoth, with units passing through them. Watchers of the Goldenwood now getting into melee. The best unit that Lorien have in melee, really. But Temple Executioners, which are enslavers, so we're seeing a lot of elite units now. I mean, we're coming towards the end of the battle, so it does make sense that we're seeing more of this sort of thing. Riders of the Bruinen. Firing away into the Ferotrim Javelins, another unit which is actually pretty dangerous in melee, but still with a few missiles left to play with the elves. An important factor late game in battles like this. Blackwatch Legion now moving forward. I mean, one thing we haven't seen is the Witches. It's entirely possible the elves shot them earlier on in proceedings, but maybe not. I feel like this is the kind of battle where if Angmar do keep them back in the trees, it's easy enough to forget about them. Whitey Myrdain backed up by Elder Enway. The Blackwatch Legion certainly causing a bit of chaos, but I don't know. There isn't really anything in behind them which is ready to follow through. I mean, they could use the Scourge Raiders for that maybe, but they need more units, I think, because as the Blackwatch Legion push further into Elven territory, you can see Roiling Riverwoods are on the way. They're going to end up getting isolated and destroyed. They have ultimately brought about the end of that unit of Hiriek, which is fair enough, but is that going to be enough in the long run? The Elven counter-attack, I think, is more or less at an end, which are on pikemen moving forward now, but you can see based on the minimap that I do think Angmar, they do need to be pushing forward with everything they have left at this point, really, because I don't think the attackers over yonder have got enough, really. Wooden Realm Axemen are in behind enemy lines, being awkward, trying to pick off this unit of Carmel Shadow Guard. There's the Balkoth Sapphire Bladesmen, who are also another high-end javelin unit akin to the Ferotrim Javelins. Could be very useful in melee as well when they pull out those Falxes of theirs. More archers that are out of ammunition being committed forward to the front line by the elves now, just trying to keep the attackers contained. Elders of the Elven King still with ammunition, firing away and dealing with something like the Gambrim is a worthy cause. And the Karas Galadon's Guardians make for an ideal anchor in this kind of situation for the elves. Outranging the Hellbirds even without the support of Thranduil's finest just in behind them. Very long, ready to support the front line should it be needed. Scourge Raiders once again moving forward, whittling down the Mirkwood defenders that remain over here. More units, I mean, here come the Hammer Guard. A little bit better late than never, I suppose. The Blackwatch Legion are still alive, and the Guardians of Khan Doom also arrive on the front line along with the Barroway, so Angmar actually are making progress. Could have executed a little bit cleaner, but doing reasonably well there. God Helim are in support, however, another Silverthorn Arrow unit. Forward come the Blackguard. I assume Angmar's Witches are still skulking around somewhere if they're going to commit their bodyguard units now. Maybe seeing them soon. They're going after the Witch Realm Pikeman with those Silverthorns, which is a worthwhile endeavour, certainly. I mean, it's also possible they got charged and killed, I suppose, the Witches by the cavalry which has been roaming around. Following around with the Ruin and Riverwoods. Are they going to... No, I was going to say, they really shouldn't be... Just leave that to the archers. Don't charge headlong into... It's going to be a... almost certainly going to be a rout there for the Scourge Raiders. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. Ooh, be very careful. Witch Realm Pikeman. taking a lot of damage still though, but the Blackguard able to charge into the riders. Keep an eye on what Angmar are doing over there, because that's probably the most success the attacks are going to be having, because over here still the attackers being whittled down. Maybe the Witches can be the sort of thing to bring this battle back into parity. When the announcer thinks the battle is swinging towards the defenders, you know that the defenders have done a lot of damage to the attackers. They only generally say that just before a defender victory, so the fact that he's saying it with a decent portion of the battle still to go is quite telling. Blackwatch Legion still pushing forwards. Again, meeting another heavy swordsman unit. Maybe because all of the units that defenders still have left are all pretty strong. Wardens of Amon Lank moving forward. What do they have left in reserve? Only one other unit back here, but it is Palace Guards. I mean, they've got all of their strongest stuff, really, the elves remaining. Imladris committed their Gwathi Myrdain, and Lothlorien have had their units on the front line as well, but Mirkwood still have their bodyguard units that they can commit forward. Certainly worse units that you could be depending upon in the late game. And the heavier Mirkwood spears dealing with some Easterling units that were making their way over here, perhaps as something to try and help out the Angmaran efforts. Godhelm are now pushing in to deal with what remains of those Scourge Raiders. A simple enough task for a unit as strong as they are. Blackguard and Pikes, I mean, Angmar are going to be kind of victorious. Riders of the Groinen, however, once again charging in. Must be doing quite well for themselves, actually, in terms of kills here. What is going on over here? So yeah, the Sapphire Bladesmen did come in, but it was far too late, really. The Karas Galadon's Guardians are still in such health as well that, barring the Witches, I can't really see the attackers making a comeback in this fight, really. The amount of kills on the Lothlorien archers that we're going to see in the splash screen at the end is going to be fairly significant. I think those Cairn Amroth Rangers had a fairly ideal position they could take up. Looking protectors in here. What remains of the Shadow Guard acting as something of a rear guard, but a rear guards are really nothing at this point. The Sapphire Bladesmen trying to get in and around the Pikes to do a little bit more damage to them, but even if they do kill off a few more, it's not really going to make a difference. And Watchers of the Goldenwood are there to do the business also. Guardians of Calm Doom still in decent number, but there you can see the Wardens of Amon Lank. I think those are poison projectiles, not armor-piercing ones, even though they've got like a chunkier black projectile. I don't think they're armor-piercing at range. Otherwise we'd be seeing a little bit more devastation on the part of the Angmar in here. But it is going to be Angmar almost... Oh, there we go, the Witches are still alive. And they do manage to score a hit on the Mirkwood units, so are they going to be able to make this pay for themselves? I mean, the Sindar the Girdler there, surely the Witches would just notice those green streaks are not exactly subtle things when you see them streaking towards you, and the Sindar the Girdler are the best place to deal with them. Ooh, but no. Cancelled shot there, though. They need the Witches at this point, the attackers. If it comes down to just pure melee, they will lose this battle. And of course now Elven King's Palace Guard on the way. I mean, bold, because if the Witches do turn around they could grill that whole unit, but
Good tidings. The enemy general lies dead.
that I suppose has to be the Rudauer General. Yeah, and there we go, look. The Palace Guard absolutely grilled. That was always the risk with doing that and not simply charging at them with the Sindar the Girdle sooner. A little bit slow on the uptake there, Mirkwood, but Angmar reaping the rewards. I still don't think that is going to be enough to turn this battle around, to be honest with you. But it's at least one last spit in the eye that Angmar can manage. The Elders of the Elven King are still over there, which is going to try and get up onto this hilltop over here and presumably fire a shot down into this concentration of Elven infantry that they can perceive. Surely not, yeah, they see them. Elves of the Elven King immediately going after the Witches, and I'm like, nope. your barbecuing days are at an end. I can't imagine barbecue made with the green fire of Angmar is going to be terribly tasty. It will taste a little bit rancid. So Angmar making a good fist of it. Mirkwood now surrounding what remains. It's going to be the Barrowites the last one standing, isn't it? It's going to be a slog through them when all is said and done. If they run out of projectiles, they're still going after the Witches, I think. Unless the Witches are already all dead. There's 5 of them still remaining, but cavalry on the way in. I think the Angmar in general is still alive, so then around will hold together a little bit longer yet. 10% exactly in favour of the defenders, this. 10% in favour of the defenders is not often a margin we see though, so digging into this back corner was the right move in the end. May have been a little bit more entertaining as a fight if we did get to see the middle island, but it's very likely the attackers would have been able to surround and destroy elements of the defending positions if they had done that, so very understandable why they posted up in the encampment in the corner, and ultimately you cannot argue with the results. The elves are going to go on to be victorious here. Just throwing everything they have left in at this point. 41 Watch to the Goldenwood, Carascaladon's Guardians being a very useful tool for ensuring that Mordor, Rune and Grudower were never going to make the kind of progress they wanted to see over on the other side. They still have the Elders of the Elven King in reserve as well. And technically one Kindred of Caliban. Is that the General by any chance? Well, 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 look who it is. It is Haldir. He's looked better, hasn't he? But he has managed to survive.
The battle is very much in our favour. Victory will be ours.
The Guardians of Cardoon are routing off now. Oh, the Witch is actually still firing away. So that will bring the bring the margin closer a little bit, but again, on this occasion, the Witches for Angmar were really just a leveller, really. Not the devastating coup de grace that we often see them be for the attackers when where Angmar are concerned. And come the remaining units now, the final Mirkwood elements, 14 Barrowites, the Hammer Guard also going to fight to the bitter end over here. Is the Angmar General still alive? Yes, he's right there. Right in the thick of things. Unlike Haldir, who is currently doing his best to avoid combat so that he can live. Victory is a distinct possibility. You don't say. And that's going to be that. And it's an entertaining fight, I have to say. Nice to see a themed battle as well. It's been a while actually since we've done a battle with a clear theme such as this one, and I'm sure people will be pleased that the elves won this one, unlike the last battle. We saw the elves on the defence at Lest, where they were ultimately overrun in the end, despite giving a good shake. On this occasion, they are going to be successful. The elves showcasing really what they're all about in this kind of situation, really leveraging their quality and their missiles to devastating effect. And the attackers, I don't think the attackers had the wrong idea as such. Maybe the really aggressive push from Mordor needed to wait a little bit longer, maybe a little bit more playing tag with the elves, skirmishing with them, throwing a couple of units in to just keep the attack going, and then when the elves have used some of their ammunition a little bit more so perhaps. But other than that, I mean, on this occasion the defensive position just really favoured the elves and plenty of carnage and destruction. So yeah, the elves victorious, good kill counts all around for them, of course. The orcs very similar, I think. I mean, Lothlorien maybe stand out a little bit for the defenders, but I'm sure as when we look at the archers, we will find out what the cause of that was. But yeah, big thank you to Winged Swordsman for sending this one in, and a big thanks to all the players for being a part of it. So Lothlorien, yeah, 1,015 kills on the Karen Amroth Rangers, so we have seen 1,000 kills before. It is rare, even for Rangers, but there you go, over 1,000 kills on the Karen Amroths, which goes some way to just explaining how the assaults started to falter over on the other side there. So that's nearly a third of Winged Swordsman's total kills from a single unit. Kindred of Caliborn, though, also with 420. Watch of the Golden with 221. Plenty of units breaking 100, 200 on those Lornand Archers. I mean, look at all of this. I mean, one unit of Marchborn's only got 36, but other than that, plenty of good kills. Karas Galadon's Guardians getting 202 on the front line, which is pretty impressive for a unit of Pikes, even a higher end one like that. A lot of the basic infantry actually did fairly average. I mean, the Axemen, 126 is okay, but 27 is really poor for a unit of Axemen actually like this. Riders of the Goldenwood as well, maybe not as many kills as you could see from them. But overall, I think you can't be complaining too much as Lothlorien. I mean, some units are always going to perform better than others. There's only so many orcs to go around after all, and Karen Amroth Rangers in particular were feeling pretty greedy today, weren't they? So yeah, big thank you to Winged Swordsman for this one. He sent me a few more as well, which is going to give me plenty to get on with, although this is among one of the last replays I'm going to be recording before I'm being sent on yet another trip away for work, so it is what it is. I think I'm going to be able to just about fill out the schedule fully as well, albeit it is going to be, like I said, big siege battles on Saturday, and then more pitch battles, a few more Silmarillion battles actually as a result of more pitch battles being necessary on the Wednesdays, at least for the time being, so that's just going to keep the schedule bobbing along nicely for the time being. Once I get back though, my intention is actually to take 2 weeks off this time, so that should give me a little bit more breathing space, and of course we are marching ever closer towards the important end of year changes, which are going to significantly shake things up, but it can only be in a good way for the channel, as I've already mentioned several times already in my ramblings at the end of these battle replays. So already going to, well, when I get back and I have those 2 weeks off, I'm going to be starting to put in place at least a lot of the initial groundwork for a lot of the changes which are going to be happening, both in my life and for the channel. So a little bit of planning ahead. Those changes obviously won't actually be coming into effect until at the earliest December, but more likely January of 2023. So it's still a fair ways off yet, but still it's worth thinking about now, because I don't want to be caught cold again and essentially lose the opportunity to reorganise things. But yeah, irregardless, I mean, this is kind of me just rambling on again, so no need for this to continue. Like I said, the next battle up after this one in the midweek I think is going to be another pitch battle on Silmarillion, and following up the next weekend we're going to be seeing another Reforged siege, which may be another one which Winged Swordsman sent me, or it may be a battle on Londare. We'll have to wait and see. It kind of depends on what I feel like recording at the time. But yeah, no need to worry too much about that. There will be a video regardless. So yeah, big thank you to Winged Swordsman once again for sending me the battle replay. Big thanks to all the players for being a part of it. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.